G'day, g'day, wherever you are. This is Mastering Music, Mastering Life. If you don't know by now, I am Tony Jack the Bear Mance, and I am the Grand Fromage here at Deluxe Mastering Studios. And today I've got from Monolith Studios in Melbourne, a bloke I've been wanting to get on for a little while. And while we have been focusing on mastery engineers, I'm wanting to diversify this podcast and just talk to some really cool motherfuckers who are doing great things in music. And I'm particularly chuffed to have Chris Themelco on from Monolith Studios. So, Chris, thank you for availing yourself today.
Oh, dude, thank you so much for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
It's good to have you with us, mate. And, you know, one of the main reasons you're on is because I'm trying to bring a diverse range of people on from the industry, you know, whether it's Melbourne or international. And I always get really excited when I speak to younger guys, and, you know, and yeah, you're a grown ass man now, but you know, relative to me, you're a young dude, you have achieved a lot. And as you know, mate, yeah, young kids, young adults are my passion, trying to help to inspire them and have conversations with people that can hopefully inspire them. And, you know, sometimes youngsters in their 20s just go, oh, fuck, how do I start? What do I do? And they compare themselves to the older people, and people want it really fast. And, you know, you're a relatively young guy, and you've had, and again, without pissing in your pocket, mate, you've done so well for yourself. You've got a fantastic work ethic. You've established yourself. You have a great reputation in this town. And so I thought we'd just have a conversation about you, Monolith, you know, how you your journey into it, and hopefully throw a few pearls of wisdom to people who are in their 20s who are thinking about starting a studio. And it's like, oh, you know, what are the strategies? What are the things that you know, what are the challenges? Yeah. So anyway, mate, just for those who are watching or listening, tell us a little bit about Monolith. Tell us about what you guys do, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in this whole fucking mess.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's that kind of description, definitely. So I am still the frontman of Orpheus Omega, just melodic death metal band from Melbourne, and started the band 10 years ago. And just in the process of being in a band, I just picked up some habits of, you know, being able to record demos and all that kind of thing, because, you know, it just makes life easier. And I think, you know, most bands should try to do that sort of thing, just because it's really good for writing and being able to share your ideas and all that. I was studying computer science actually at La Trobe, and did web design, had a degree in computer science and all that. And I guess the audio engineering stuff was always just a hobby for me, but I really enjoyed doing it. And so I started helping other friends' bands and just sort of, you know, pretty much just offering free recording, just because it was just something I wanted to do for fun. But there was that point somewhere in there where the crossover between not really enjoying what I was doing for work and just how much I enjoyed the audio engineering stuff really hit that balance of like, okay, I think I really want to do the audio as a job. And that's where it got scary because that's the part that was like, it's easy to be in a job where someone else is your boss and you get told what to do and you just need to do the job. Like it's not fun, but it's definitely easy. But I feel like I'm the kind of person who like uses a brute force approach to everything. I don't know the best way to go about stuff, but I just keep butting my head against the wall until the wall gives up. And I feel like that's been my approach to this, to be fair. Like I spent a lot of time just doing a lot of like online study, following a lot of other engineers who were doing well. And I think my mentality, especially whether you're in a band, doing audio engineering, whatever it is that you do, find people who are really good at what they're doing and just work out why they're doing well at it. Not necessarily to copy what they're doing. It's just to be able to go, why are they doing so well? What methods are they putting in place that leading them to succeed? Whether it's the way they approach learning about their craft, whether it's the way they approach dealing with people, all that sort of thing is really important, because you can copy someone as much as you like, but that's not going to really get you anywhere. It's just not the way to succeed. But learning from the people who've done well before you is always the way to go about it, as far as I'm concerned. And then, if you can innovate from there and find things that work for you that don't work for other people, it's even better, because you'll sort of separate yourself from the crowd a little bit as well.
I completely, just to sort of cut you off there, but you make a really good point. I completely agree. And this is something that I did when I was younger, and a lot of young cats do, is that when you're coming from a place of not knowing much, very little or nothing, you look at people's work, you admire their work. And so the tendency is, I want to be like them. I want to be one of the cool kids. And so, of course, the natural tendency is, we want to belong. We want to feel like we're, as good. So that's the benchmark, if you will. And I get that, and I understand that. But the one thing I really try and tell young kids, and something that you've done, and I'm glad you raised it, is to see why they do what they do, and then try and innovate from there. And the sooner you can develop your sense of confidence in yourself and your own style, the better. And also, before you're talking about doing stuff for free and sort of making a living from the point of going, okay, work is now really not quite there. I want to do this. One of the biggest challenges that people have, and young people particularly, is when do I start charging? How much do I start charging? So talk us through your process of going from, I'm doing shit for free, because typically that's the way people get opportunity, to I have a value and I'm worth something. And then for people to start taking you seriously, or for people to start thinking differently about you, from, oh, this is Chris, he does shit for free, he's been doing for free for a while, and now all of a sudden, because people are very afraid of that. So talk us through that process, because I think that's something a lot of kids really get stuck on, and could use, your input would be really helpful here.
So I guess, again, for me, the way I approach things is, I don't know, I'm pretty logical and down the line about it. So when I was doing it for free, it wasn't a source of income for me. It was something I was still trying to learn. So I don't think something being free doesn't have a value. I very much think that money is money is one part of a value of a service. Like, obviously it gets, like, for me, at this point in time, the reputation that I get, the satisfaction that I get from working with clients is part of the value, instead of just getting paid for the work. So not getting paid for the work at the start was because I was learning from it. I was learning how to interact with clients, and that had its own value for me. So not getting paid for it wasn't just, oh, I'm just doing it for free for nothing. I was doing it for free so that I could interact with more people and learn a lot from different bands, which wasn't going to happen being a nobody with no experience. So there's nothing wrong with doing things for free, as long as you understand the inherent value to it and you're getting something out of it, because otherwise it is pointless. I was doing part-time work at the time, so I pulled back to doing part-time, and that was enough to, cover enough bills and stuff, because I wasn't just going to throw myself in the deep end without an income. And during that time, I sort of went, okay, well, what sort of money works for me to offset the amount of time I'm putting in? So I looked at it as kind of like, all right, well, if I get paid minimum wage for the time I'm doing audio stuff, that's still a value of work that someone else would be doing, whether they're working at Coles or Safeway or whatever it happens to be. So the way I looked at it was like, I basically just charged like what my minimum wage would be if I was doing the recording stuff. And that's how that started. And I kind of looked at it as, I wanted to basically up my prices every 6 months for the first few years. And that way it gave me not only a long-term goal with the income side of it, but it also gave me long-term goals to be able to go every 6 months. I expect to be a certain amount better than I was the 6 months prior. I want to be able to justify that jump in price as well. And at least for me, that has worked out. This has been a full-time gig for me now this is the 5th year I've been doing it full-time. And those steady jumps in both, I guess, the quality of the work and the rates that I charge has balanced. It hasn't been something where I've gone, I'm going to charge way more, even though I'm not doing heaps better. That's silly as well. I think with any industry, there are definitely people who are charging exuberant amounts of money for a service that, I guess, and this is probably just a jaded thought of mine, but I do, and again, this kind of goes back to why I really appreciate talking to you. There are, I guess, someone who's been in this industry for a pretty short time, really, there has been some experiences I've had with, I guess, people who've been around for quite some time, where the way they approach the industry. And I guess, you know, even just seeing their approach to the musicians and the people they work with versus, you know, what they've been charging for like the longest of time is a little bit disappointing, because I feel like they don't care about the work as much as some other people, and which is something that's, at least for me, earlier on, was a little bit hard to swallow, because it was people that I kind of wanted to learn from. And then it's been nice coming across people who don't have that mentality, and people who really do put in the effort no matter what. And I guess the money side of it really just kind of comes with that. And I think because it is a service industry, it's not, I mean, we are selling a product, but it's the service that is the product.
Bingo.
Clients go where they feel valued. And I guess, yeah, again, the money side of it, at least over the last few years, has just been so much less of a concern, and even a point at all in any of the talking to clients and stuff. Like 99% of the time, it's just give us an invoice, let's get this going. It's not, whereas when I was starting out, where I had to be a bit more like, is this okay to charge or whatever? And, you know, people will go where they feel the value is worth it. So I've been lucky enough, at least, that up until this point, the clients that I have and work with do find that whatever I do charge is worth it for what they're getting out of it. So it is a bit of a, I mean, maybe there are better ways to do it than what I've done. I'm sure there are, but for me, it's worked. I've been just pretty steady about the growth. And I think that's something I've tried to be realistic about, is just trying to keep it steady so that it lasts long-term, instead of trying to build it up really quickly and then maybe stumbling somewhere in there. I live alone. I moved out of house, out of home 5 years ago now. So this kind of has to be a sustaining job for me. So being clever about it really does, take some time out of the week to really, like, make sure I have all my affairs in order and all that sort of thing. So slow and steady for me.
Yeah. Value, and, money's important, and everyone's on a budget, and it's a discussion that always comes up, and sometimes it's a difficult one to have, because people want to get bang for their buck, and people want to make sure that they're not charging too much. But I've always said that value is a perceived thing, and money is just a byproduct of the value that you bring. And
absolutely.
I was just telling someone the other day that as far as this place is concerned, different people come here for different reasons, and they pay what they pay for, because for each person it's a different experience. And so I think we sometimes underestimate and forget, or we focus a bit too much about money, important as it is. And we as operators, and as you said, it is a service industry, and we have to be good. We have to have our shit together. We have to have all those sort of 101 things in place. But as I've always said, kids, in this day and age where we have so many more studios, so many more facilities, so much fucking awesome talent, the internet, it's just amazing as to what choice you have. But if we can be empathetic and try and step in the shoes of the client, and for the most part, and I'm sure you agree, Chris, it's like the bands that work with you because they feel that you're there, you're present, you're involved, you're engaged, as I talk about, I'm a surrogate member of your fucking band, whether you like it or not, or realize it or not. And if that's an overinvestment, well, sorry, not sorry. But that's what I think people like to feel, that, don't they? They want, you're in a close proximity environment. You want to have a good time. It's got to be a good creative time, but people are there. They just, it's like the difference between being with a girlfriend that you love and a girl that's kind of just a weekend thing. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. Like, funny analogy, but it's a really good point. Like, you do have to be invested in this. And I did a little like random video a little while ago about, like, especially from the producer side, when you're a band, find the right producer for your band, find the right person to work with your band, because, again, looking at that whole thing of like money being money and everyone's on a budget, that's obviously the case. But when it comes down to, like, a band doing an album and whatnot, again, looking at that value thing, if you're going to drop, like say it's like 10K on an album or something, if you're going to drop a certain amount of money, your artwork, and you mix all those things, that's going to be there forever. That's going to be this thing that you look back on, whether it's 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, and it's not going anywhere. You've done it, it's finished, and it's this little time capsule where you and X amount of other people were together in this thing emotionally, creatively, and all those different things. And if the person who's trying to, I guess like for me, the production side of it, mixing, mastering, all that, that's the glue that keeps all of that together. If you use a shitty glue, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And that part of the process needs to be always as positive as possible and as creative as possible. Like obviously sometimes, people are going to butt heads and all that sort of thing in the studio, but the end result is what you're fighting for. So people finding the right person who's going to be invested in that is the most important thing. And I can honestly say that there's been clients that I've said no to or haven't ended up getting the job because I haven't been the right person for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. They should go find the right person. I'm not the right person for every project. But as long as they find the right person, that means there's going to be more people writing music. There's going to be more people putting their heart and soul into it. And that's what we need, because you need it because the industry needs to keep spinning. We need more bands and people to be, keeping other people motivated and excited through their music. As people on the business side of it, we need more bands and stuff to exist because we need work as well. And that positive energy that goes into it needs to always be there. It is disappointing and disheartening sometimes that there are people out there who do make those experiences difficult. But like you said, with like the internet and everything nowadays being so easy to find people and see the work and be able to, see what the person's like, because all these people who are like self-employed in the music industry and all that now, everyone's on Facebook, everyone's on Twitter, everyone's on Instagram. Their personalities are out there for the world to see. And at the end of the day, you want to find the person you want to work with. Like no one's going to look at someone who's being an arsehole and just go, wow, can't wait to work with them. It's not going to happen. So, nine times out of 10, I guess I would say is most people are going to look at someone and go, they seem like they have a really good work ethic. They seem like they're going to be invested in this project. And that's the first port of call. From there, it's, what have you worked on? I like this thing you worked on. Can we have that same experience with you and all that? So no, it's you're absolutely right. Like being the surrogate band member, being invested in it, whether they like it or not, is always going to lead to a better outcome. That's just how it is. And I majority of the time always end up so invested in the bands I work with, and I end up going to the shows, buying the merch, and I'm always excited when I see an article about them or a review or something or whatever it is. And I do feel like partially part of it in like a really like seeing your children go out and do something well. It is that feeling, and I think that is really important because again, like you said, money's just one aspect of it, and it's like it's great to be able to like pay your bills and all that sort of thing, but if that's all you're doing, then it's pretty pointless.
Yeah, and you're right about that whole thing of again, I still like to go and pay for the gigs and buy the merch, and it pales into insignificance compared to what I get paid to doing a job. But I know it's very feeble, but at the very least it's one sort of way of supporting. But you're right, it's great to see these bands doing well. And even though we're in a day and age where back in the day where it was all physical, your credit isn't there as much unless of course you do your own social media thing or bands are kind enough to tag you in. But word of mouth in this day and age, I find is, it's great having social media. It's great having campaigns. It's great, putting your selfies up, but nothing beats word of mouth. And that can only happen when, you give that great experience for people and they walk out there and they sincerely, and unfortunately, as you know, my friend, good news travels fairly slow. Bad news travels a lot faster. And not only does it travel a lot faster, but it's usually embellished a lot more. So, you really got to be on point with that shit.
Oh, absolutely. I think you and I have had this chat before. And again, the whole word of mouth thing, like, I don't know, like probably 80-90% of my work still comes from word of mouth. And usually it's, a musician will tell a band that they're friends with, oh, dude, fucking love your album. Sounds sick. Who did it? And then they'll hit me up because it's, hey man, such and such said that they had a really good time working with you. And I really like what the album was like. Let's chat. I put the odd Facebook ad up and all that because you do have to have those things up just for a presence thing, so just that constant content and whatnot. But I get barely any work through ads. It's mostly just for brand awareness more than anything. People don't want to look at an ad for a recording studio. It's not like looking at like a ad for the new iPhone and it's just like, here's the new sleek thing that everyone has, go and buy it. It doesn't work like that with recording. Like they don't you can't sell an experience through an ad. That has to come from people talking to you or talking to people who've worked with you. So I think especially now more than ever, given that I feel like we're at a time where a lot of people are starting to go small business again, at least in mentality. Word of mouth is hands down the most important thing.
So tell me, how did Monolith? So Monolith being the studio that is, shall we say, a bit more niche in it's black metal, death metal, speed metal, heavy rock, doom, the much heavier side. So was that something by design because that was a personal preference of yours, or was it just something because initially when you started out, you had some success with those bands, and then all of a sudden you became known for, hey, he's the guy?
For me, it was because my background is in much heavier music overall. There's a lot more rock stuff nowadays too, which is great because I really enjoy working on rock. And I feel like if you've worked on extreme metal, everything else from there is just fun comparatively. But I've obviously, I come from an extreme music background. And so those bands obviously drew me to them when it comes to the initial starting Monolith Studios. So more of your like thrash, power metal, even some death metal bands and whatnot. I don't actually do that many death metal bands. It's definitely more on the, I do still stray towards melodic stuff regardless of the genre. But that was most because, you know, as you do, that my band, the bands I've been in are heavier, and that's where I started off with it all. And so those kind of bands tend to gravitate towards me. But I pretty much work with almost every genre of metal you can think of, really. I think I've pretty much worked on an EP or an album from almost, you know, I guess every overarching genre of metal at this point. And given how diverse metal can be, it's good for me because it keeps me interested. It may seem like a niche, but it's more, the niche is just metal overall, which in itself is just this disgustingly huge thing. So between that and the rock stuff that I've worked on and continue to work on, it's actually a really broad array of music, which is probably sounds more surprising than it is, but it definitely keeps me on my toes.
Metal never ceases to amaze me as to just how genreified and sub-genreified it is. It almost seems like there's something new happening all the time, and I've always found it fascinating. And I haven't, done a lot with the very, very heavy. I mean, I've done a handful of albums over the years, and but what always impressed me about when those jobs come in, a lot of time, the production value is great. People, I think, really underestimate the musicianship, the technical skills. It's just not this mindless screaming and distortion. I think for the uneducated or people that aren't quite aware, they can just completely discount it as being really quite mindless. And what I've learned over the years, and while I don't pretend to be any kind of expert, but I've learned to appreciate how technical it can be, the musicianship that's involved in the playing. I mean, I remember a while ago, you probably know Andy Gillen, Cemetery. A while ago, did an album for him, and he was sitting on my couch, man. And while we were mastering this album, this guy was sitting with fucking the manuscript. Every song he was sitting with manuscript, and as it was playing, he was there flicking his manuscript, and like, I mean, that to me was like, wow, like that's fucking heavy, dude. But the guy's serious. I mean, people do underestimate it. So I've learned to appreciate it more and more. And while it may appear to be mindless, simple, and throwaway, fuck, man, there's so much more going on there.
I think like with every genre, there's good and bad bands, right? So there are definitely mindless, boring, crappy metal bands. Like, that's, if anything, that's going to be the prominent amount, because like with all things, if you look at every good, successful band, there's about 1,000 shitty, bands beneath that. It's just how it is music in general. I guess your difference with pop music is there isn't much of an underground pop scene. You know what I mean? Like you don't really have that. Basically, you have the ones who do well on huge labels, or they don't exist. It's not really like the pool isn't quite there. With metal, because it is such an underground thing and it is such a visceral, emotional sort of genre of music, regardless of what style of it you play, you're going to get a lot more people who are just there playing it as an emotional expression instead of trying to succeed necessarily and be the best at it. So I think that's part of the allure to it. That said, when you do start looking at some of those more successful metal bands or And for me, especially in Australia, we have an absolutely amazing metal scene. Some of these dudes are some of like the best musicians in the world. Like that's without diluting that at all. Some of these dudes are literally some of the best musicians I've ever seen. And one thing I find funny is like if I work on rock stuff and all that, because it is so laid back and simple in not a bad way, but because it is simpler music, it actually gives me more movement to move as an engineer because I have more tricks I can pull out. With metal, majority of the work is getting the arrangements because there's not much I can do apart from making it sound really good. Like I can throw the odd effect in, and I can do the odd cool thing and, you know, maybe make a few suggestions. But really the thing with metal that I love most, and again, the reason it drew me to it when I was younger, is the fact that the song tells the story. The mix just needs to bring it out. You really need to be careful with your arrangements in metal because there is so much going on. Like distorted guitars ruin mixes and like metal is just distorted guitars. And because of that, everything needs to be written very carefully. You need to make sure you put things in the right pockets and don't just mess everything up and make it a smear of noise. And when you can do that properly with metal, it is still for me the most amazing experience for me musically when I hear a really good metal song. Like it's still, you know, nearly, I guess, like, you know, 15 plus years on since I got really into music, it still blows my mind and makes the hair on the neck stand up.
Yeah. One of the interesting things I find, and this is a broad generalization, Chris, but for some reason, when metalheads have come in here to work with me, and particularly when we're looking at that heavier end of the spectrum, it seems like the more aggressive and brutal the music, the gentler people they are. They're really
every time it is the funniest thing having dudes come in and sing about occult stuff and like, you know, all the ridiculous stuff that goes on, and then they're just like, oh, do you want me to go make you a cup of tea? And you're like, yeah.
and also they're it amazes me how broad their musical taste is as well. I mean, they love what they do, and they could be considered purists to a point, not to the point of being chin strokers, but you know, they'll come in and they'll talk about different sort of albums that they bought in styles that made me go, well, like a jazz record or a fucking roots record. I said, dude, really? I said, yeah, man, I fucking love it. And so that's been quite a revelation for me as well, just to hear again how broad-minded and how much they appreciate music as a whole, even though, you know, they do quite a, you know, specific and style of thing.
But if you look at, like, at least for me, if you look at all the best metal bands in the world, or at least some of the most well-known ones, their musical tastes are from ridiculous genres. Like they don't, like the best metal bands don't just listen to metal. I don't see how you can listen to one genre of music and expect to write something unique if you're just listening to that. So majority of the metal bands that I work with that I really like, all those dudes will come back and just be like, yeah, man, just like listening to Zeppelin and listening to like Camel and like prog, old 70s prog and all these other bands that you just would not really think about in their music. But then when you just look at the approach to the music and some of the playing, then it starts to make sense. And I think those are the bands that interest me the most because they're not trying to be a Metallica cover band or whatever else, you know, like they're actually trying to write metal, write heavy emotion, you know, heavy, aggressive, emotionally charged music from influences that are musically different to that. And I think that's the most fun part for sure.
Tell us a bit about your band, mate. What are you guys up to? I know you've had a few shows, and you know, how important is it for you to be able to write, be an artist, tour, and play alongside you know, being in the studio?
For sure. So I'm in two bands at the moment. The band I started, Orpheus Omega, very European styled melodic death metal band. So if you like In Flames, Soilwork, Dark Tranquility, that sort of thing. Started that 10 years ago. Have toured pretty hard, gone overseas a few times, done a fair few national tours and whatnot. And The Enemy is the other band that I'm in, who I've been friends with for 10 years, sort of played some of our first gigs ever with Orpheus with them. And they were looking for a guitarist a few years back when one of the guitarists left, and just decided to, you know, I have all the time in the world. Why not join another band? I'm sure that'll be a great idea. But I did that. And so in both bands at the moment, it works decently enough as long as we work our timeframes and stuff out. But basically, we've been busy with our own album this year with both bands, actually. And so I've played one gig this year. Played two a couple of weeks ago, but up until that, played only one gig this year, which is actually really difficult because I have all these bands coming in recording and they're off playing gigs, and I'm just like, need to get back on stage. But we've got I think 12 or 13 show Australian tour later this year with Psychroptic and Orpheus as the main support. And even if you're not into metal, Psychroptic are basically, as far as I'm concerned, the best metal band that this country's ever produced. And I'm pretty sure you'll find a lot of people who feel that way. Literally, like they're a sort of tech death metal band, but their more recent stuff is a lot groovier. And it's weird to I guess for some people who don't listen to that style of music, it'd probably be weird to consider groovy death metal. But if you check them out, you'll understand what I mean. Basically, just literally one of the most talented bands in the world. Absolutely amazing. So we're lucky enough to be touring with them later this year. So I think that's going to fill me with a lot more inspiration for just work stuff and music for the following year as well, definitely. But as far as keeping a balance is concerned, part of starting the studio was because I wanted to have the freedom to follow my own musical endeavors as well. And I think at this point in time, they flow into each other almost 50-50. Being in my band makes me want to do more studio stuff. Doing the studio stuff makes me want to do more of my own band stuff. So I really am glad they feed in. It used to be the studio feeding into the live stuff and doing my band, but I really appreciate that it's very much balanced at the moment. I think at this point in time, if I didn't have music of my own to create, it would just push me to be even more creative with the bands that I work with, because I'd have to get that out somehow. But I'm pretty stoked at the balance I've got at the moment between the two, to be honest. It's probably, I reckon the last year and a half or 2 years has been sort of the best time of my life creatively, musically, between studio and bands. So I'm having a pretty good time at the moment with it.
That's great. What do you think is your biggest challenge in running your own facility, Chris? What are the biggest challenges that you find running your own?
So time management's a tough one, because as much as you want to try to put time restrictions in, it doesn't work running a studio, because there's always things that are going to crop up. Sometimes bands are going to have to be late. Sometimes you're on a roll with a recording and you don't want to finish for the day because you just want to keep smashing it out. So I reckon time management's probably one of the biggest ones. And I find that seems to be a thing for most engineers that I know. Just trying to have realistic timeframes for things and just trying to be as creative as possible, but also not burning yourself out. I've had a few years ago, I had a pretty bad burnout, and that was a lesson, massive lesson for me, because I pretty much nearly threw in the towel with that. So setting some boundaries, that kind of is what that all falls under. Setting boundaries for yourself. Being able to separate work time from admin time and personal time. That's really hard. I would say for me, that is actually probably the biggest challenge. And I still have it. I'm better at it now, but I would say it's still far from ideal. But I don't think doing this job and living this lifestyle is ever going to be ideal. If I wanted that, I'd probably just go back to a 9 to 5 and, just write off by the end of the day work and just, not care about it. But this is something that you're sort of passionate about 24/7. So it's just trying to put boundaries in that you can switch off from. I think that is for me, this one anyway.
Really important. That was an important one for me. I'm a confessed late bloomer and burnt out a few times, my friend, all just through my own self-imposed expectations of wanting to get everything done. But I also found that eventually learning to let go of things, because when something's your baby, you're attached to it and you love it, because no one can love the thing that you birthed like
more than you. Yeah, no, that's exactly.
But at some point you've got to, at least in my experience, I had to get to a point where I had to, and a lot of that's ego too, because again, it's yes, it's your love, it's your passion, but there's certainly ego involved there too, that no one's as good as me, or no one can do it like me. But at some point you had to give that up and learn to start delegating. And I slowly just started delegating little things. And as you know, I got Tom Bid, my guy, who he's not just taking part, but eventually he's going to take over. He's just been a fucking find to finds. And you got your boy Zach, and tell us a little bit about Zach and how you came across him and what he's doing, because I've only got to know him recently through a little bit of a mentoring group, which I did. I was very impressed with him. So tell us a little bit about Zach and where he's at and what he's doing, and where you see him going, because I really feel he's a real fucking fine man. And I'm not saying it, again, piss in his pocket or your pocket, but I think he's going to fucking make a real contribution.
Yeah, dude. So I've known Zach for about, I want to say 7 years now, just as a friend. He's probably one of the most intense people I know in general, which is probably why it works so well for him to be doing stuff with me.
Define intense for me.
Zach,
but you just
yeah. Zach doesn't switch off. His brain is literally just on like 24/7. Which is kind of like where I was at one point a little while ago, which is probably why he sort of stood out as someone who I'm like, maybe this can work. But Zach's always got ideas and just always he's always like 10 years ahead of himself in the amount of ideas he has. And it's kind of one of those things where it's a really good thing to have. And then it's just about how to like make that productive thing instead of just a, haywire thought process sort of thing. So at least, so basically Zach has his own thing going on, which is Earthtide Studios. I think is his official sort of name for his stuff. And basically Zach has a whole bunch of contract stuff for me, which is awesome because it's made my life so much easier. There was just a point I hit where Zach was trying to get into the audio stuff, and like, again, super passionate dude. So it was like, yeah, okay, cool. If you want to help me out with some stuff, that'll work. And basically I was also at a point where I was just overbooking myself sometimes, and there was just things that was just like things that are important but monotonous, like drum editing and things like that just kind of, you just stare at a screen for like 7 or 8 hours and then you just kind of, want to just go nod off. Basically just got Zach in to start helping with that stuff. And I was kind of worried at the start of like, again, that sort of intense, like for me, that sort of ongoing thought process of like, I can't hand things off to other people. Like, what if it slows things down? What if I can't pay him enough and all that sort of thing? And, again, I'm glad I let go of that mentality, because having him around and being able to help me and relieve some of that stress has actually meant I can take more projects on. It's actually meant I can be more productive. So that's probably the best thing that's happened in the last 12 months, is actually being able to delegate some work to someone else. So that's been awesome.
Yeah, I think from the business financial point of view as well, I found is that by being able to delegate some of that stuff, you pay someone the appropriate rate, but then that frees you up to be able to go and do your thing, charge your rate, which then that creates a budget to be able to pay someone too. So
exactly.
You get to work, do your thing, get some help, they get paid, and so everyone gets to eat, and that win-win situation is always what you want to go for.
Well, I'll give you a good example of that is, let's say, like, so drum editing, right? If I record a whole album, it probably takes me about 2 days to edit all the drums for the whole album. Being properly meticulous with it and keeping dynamics involved actually takes a lot of time, especially with metal. So now, usually if I do a whole album, Zach will be trailing a day behind each tracking day. So by the time I'm finished tracking, I can start the next lot of tracking by like the Monday. So instead of losing those 2 days to drum editing, Zach can do that. And then I can start tracking guitars immediately, or whatever it happens to be that's next on the list, drums, bass, guitars, whatever it is. And that means that there's more time now to be able to do other work, or there's more time to be able to book in work later on. So by knocking out that one thing, it actually just makes more time and less, again, it's less stressful for me to then go, all right, I just finished tracking drums. Now I've got to spend 2 days of, monotonous drum editing in front of the computer and the rest of it. It's like, no, someone else can do that. And I can remain creative with the process, because I go straight into the guitar tracking after finishing drums. I'm still vibing off the fact that we just got these sick drum takes. They're all edited and ready for me to go. I didn't have to do that. And now I can just jump back into the creative process. So it's actually just way more productive. Again, from the value side of it, it's way more productive and creative for the clients as well, because I don't have to have that little downtime in between. I'm very much a person who loves working on something start to finish. Unfortunately, it's not always possible. But when I can do a project from start to finish and just crank through tracking, that's when I'm most creative, when my brain is in the project and I'm just like living and breathing this thing. So like for an album, it's about a month of tracking or whatever it is. If I'm living and breathing that process, my brain is like firing at all times, even while we're tracking, with new ideas and suggestions and all that. Anything I can do to not break that up is super helpful. And again, having Zach around to do that is actually fantastic. And he's starting to get some of his own clients as well that he's recording and that I'll end up mixing and all that sort of thing. And, you know, he'll sit in and watch and be part of the tracking for some of the stuff I do as well. I've given him a bit of bass tracking as well to do with some clients and all that, just to, you know, sort of get a bit more used to some of the clients I already work with, because it does make my life easier. And it is nice to sort of get a team-based approach to it as well. And he's been doing awesome at it. So he's learning heaps. I'm benefiting from it mentally, which is great. And yeah, it's actually been going really well. And again, he also does a lot of sort of music that I don't necessarily record. So I'm learning stuff from him as well, because he's got an approach to things that I would not normally do, because it's not the sort of music I work on, and vice versa. I've been able to show him some stuff that he wouldn't normally do, because it's just how I do things, and it can obviously apply to some of the stuff he does. So there's really, like, it really is like a symbiotic sort of thing where, you know, we both learn from each other and benefit from the input we have in each other's sort of studio life, so to speak. So no, it's been really, really good. And it's nice to not be alone all the time and just be in my own thoughts. I can just be like, Zach, come over here. What am I doing? This kick sounds like crap and it's just killing me and I don't know what's wrong with it. And it's nice just to have someone else to be able to kind of go, it does sound like crap. Maybe try a different sample or whatever it is, instead of spending another hour racking my brain over it. So it helps me be more creative. He's learning a lot and he's being really helpful. So yeah, no, it's really, really good.
It's funny, interesting. You mentioned the whole company thing. Like way back in the day, I was always told, I mean, you need to have good ears and good approach and good people skills. It was, but like the Americans would call it the hang time, which is to be able to be in the room. Now, obviously, over time, particularly mastering, I guess mixing too, to a degree, but certainly with mastering and so much more online clientele and service going on, you have less and less of that. And you know, people are still something like, I'm surprised sometimes people go, well, is it okay if we come and sit in? And going, fuck yeah. I get lonely. And it's, you know, and even having someone like Tom for the same reason he says, this is like, hey, come on in, have a listen. What do you think? Like, be honest, tell me. It's good to have a human fucking you know, vibe in the place.
Even when we were doing the Chasing Lana stuff, when I was in that time, and we had it to a point where we were both really stoked. And I remember when Tom came in to have a listen, you had him come in and he was just like, mind if I try something? And I can't remember, I think he chucked like a bit of multi-band in a certain area. And we were both like, oh yeah, no, good call. And it's just, again, it's another outside set of ears, because you get used to your own ones way too easily. I still send my mixes to some of my best engineer mates before I finish it and just like, look, this sounds good to me, but I've probably spent too much time on it as well. If anything sticks out, just let me know. And on occasion, you'll have someone go, oh yeah, like, sounds really good, but did you notice this? And I'll go, no, I didn't, because it's this one little tiny thing in this whole painting, you know? So it is nice to have other people around on occasion in that sense as well. I definitely love mixing something alone for the first part, you know, just to get that vibe where you're getting it all together. And I want to be alone. I want to have the lights off and I'm just, you know, vibing out on this mix. But after that, when it gets to the nitty gritty, it's not that anything gets done wrong. It's just sometimes it's nice to have someone else come in and say something, in the same way the bands really appreciate us having our input on stuff. And the same thing with like mastering. I fucking love getting to the mastering stage, because for me, it's like, I'm really happy with the mix. Now I can't wait what someone else is going to impart on my baby. And that's why, you know, again, like, every time I've worked with you, and I'm really glad I do get to, that you're close by enough that I can come in and sit down with you. It's really awesome, you know, getting into it and just listening to the song and having the fun with it and getting it together. And then we can just both sit back and we both go, yeah, that just sounds right, because you're vibing with it. And when you do get excited and you start bopping along to it automatically, you're like, that's finished. That's it. That's it. Done.
And I think it's important also to have people that you know will be honest, not because they're just being mean, but it's not just getting confirmation bias from people, because that's all good and well to make you feel fluffy, but it's important to have people that are open and honest enough. But it's also important that you're at least open to taking on what's being said and considering it. Yeah. And then,
as long as I'm constructive, I much rather people tell me I'm doing something wrong than to tell me what I'm doing right. It's you don't learn from continuously just having people tell you you're good at stuff. It does nothing. So that, and again, from my end at least, the main thing there is like a lot of the time the bands are happy with the mixes before I am. So they'll be like, yeah, dude, don't touch it. It's finished. And I'll go, yeah, it's not, but awesome. You guys are happy with it. So let me just tweak now these few little things. And then sending it off for mastering is where I get to sit there and have someone else tell me, I feel like if you put the snare up a little bit, it'll make it easier for when I master it, because then it'll sound this way or whatever it is. And then I get to go, awesome. I didn't think that, or I didn't feel that way. And now you're giving me something else to think about. And then if I do that thing, I can disagree with it. I can sit there and say, it's probably not what I'm after, but it gives me something else to think about. And if I don't have that, then I'm always just going to keep doing the same thing, or I'm going to not necessarily think outside of the box, because what I'm hearing, I'm happy with. So I can always learn new things, and I approach every mix differently, but having someone else give you ideas or throw in something that you didn't think of means that next time you might be more weary of, look, I normally wouldn't do this thing, but what if I do try it? What if this does sound better? So absolutely, I rather people tell me what they think is not right about something I'm doing than to continuously tell me what is right, because that doesn't really help with growth or anything. And as long as it's people you trust and they can be constructive about it, I think that's always the best thing.
Totally, man. Trust is big. Building relationships is big, and I think also just coming to it from understanding that while it is competitive, there's lots of different places. I think the more we can work from that cooperative spirit, where we all do try and help each other, and just generally try and do the right thing. It does, and this is not me being all fucking woo and spiritual and talking about fucking karma and shit, but I've just found, and I know you're exactly the same, Chris, because I know a lot of fucking people that have told me that you've done it. It's like you've always given time to people, you've contributed, you've helped, you've assisted. There's been no fucking return necessarily, but just the fact that you've been availing yourself and supporting. And again, I'm just being very general, but I found the metal community overall just some of the nicest people I've dealt with. It seems to be, nothing's perfect, and there's always idiots around everywhere. Yeah. But generally, when I go to a metal gig, man, even though I was wearing black and people think it's, usually they're the nicest, coolest, most laid back people. They're friendly. They're cool as fuck. They're just awesome, man. Even though I'm not a metal person, I always do look forward to going to a metal gig. I usually have a good time, and I get to meet some really fucking nice people, man. It's a great community.
Absolutely. I think part of that is they're pretty much, the dregs of society, so to speak. They're the people that aren't cool in high school, and they're the ones that people don't give the time of day to. So they tend to be a bit more reserved as people. They tend to be a bit more reserved and polite and a bit more relaxed, because they've, like, as silly as it sounds, they've never been afforded the opportunity to be assholes. And I think that ends up coming out in the way they approach their music and people around them. I think the metal community on the whole is a very inclusive, community-based group. And, for me, it is, I do try my best to put as much as I can into that, because it is a vibe that needs to be kept together, I think. There was a point in time where I was like pretty jaded about all that stuff. Just, you get to a point, sometimes, you maybe deal with too many negative people and it rubs off on you. But like, I've found a point again, which is awesome, where I'm just like stoked to be working with all these like young bands and going to all these gigs where new bands are, because they're the ones who are excited about it. They're the ones who are really positive. And I try to really impart that after I work with bands. It's like, don't let anyone else's bullshit get you down. Don't get involved in other people's crap. You do you. And if you're a good person and you enjoy dealing with other people and you like helping other people, don't let someone else's bullshit stop you from doing that. Sometimes you're going to help someone who's going to like shit on you. That's fine. There's 20 other people who are going to do the right thing by you. You don't have to feel happy about that. But you don't have to retaliate. You don't have to feel bad about it, because it's not your problem. And that's a really important thing. And even in the point you made about like making yourself available to people or helping and whatnot, I think insecurity plays a lot in that when people don't, because like I know some dudes are like, I'm not going to tell people what my settings are, or I'm not going to tell people how I do things. And it's like, that doesn't really help the community as a whole. At the end of the day, I can tell everyone what my settings are and how I approach things, but it's the way I go about it and my ears that are going to be the reason I mix a certain way or approach something a certain way. And I would rather pass that on to other people and go, hey, find your voice and do it your way. And then we can like learn off each other. Because when you get really good at something and you start doing stuff that I don't do, then you're going to be useful to me as I am to you. Then we're going to be able to bounce ideas off each other. And this whole fucking community is going to do better for it. I know that that's not necessarily the mentality everyone takes, but it's nice to now just know more and more people who do have that. And again, someone like yourself who's been around as long as you have, I really appreciate that talking to you is one of those conversations. Like I can talk to you and you really approach it from that really holistic aspect and being able to go, the community needs to benefit. That's the only way everyone does well. And again, like, unfortunately, I feel personally that maybe just because the times have changed in the way we approach studios and stuff, especially with budgets and all that sort of thing. But there are a lot of dudes who've been around for ages who have a like sort of a very cynical view of it. And I think a lot of people learn from those guys. And it's like, that's not the way to do it. Like that whole positive mentality, I don't know, like you said about karma and all that sort of thing. I think that is the best course of action. I think being a positive person, trying to put forward as much as you can positively into the scene you're a part of is always going to give you the best returns. And that's not the reason you do it. But if you put something forward and you get something back, everyone else is doing the same thing and everyone else is benefiting from that mentality. And again, as someone who's part of the metal scene, mostly, in the time that I've spent being more of that kind of person has been the best for me mentally. And I feel like if everyone does that, then I don't really see a downside if everyone's in a good place with that.
The one guy who I consider to be the poster boy, if you will, the guy who I put on the top of the heap, the guy who I just fucking love more than anyone, especially in that scene, is Jason Fuller from Gutdown. That bloke,
Yeah,
mate, is just I have so much respect for that bloke, mate. He's such a good operator. He is just so genuine, so sincere, so fucking authentic in the way he goes about his thing. With the music and the community, and I love the fact that he has the opinion and he fucking stands up for people and he expresses himself. He is one hell of a motherfucker. I love that dude, man. He's
a really awesome example of someone who, like, for me, right, we're very opposite in our approach to like sound as far as like band stuff are concerned. And I love that because he's a dude that I like. He put a post up the other day talking about when people don't value like bands' music and stuff, you forget what goes into it. And if it does something for you, not that you owe them anything, it's just being able to go, if that does something for you, understand the value that the musician has put into it, recording, art, practice, all those things. And it was just like, I agree with so much stuff that he says. And again, he has a really great mentality towards people and the scene in general, which I love. And again, just a really good example of someone that has such an awesome mentality, also so different in approach in what he does versus like how we do things so differently in terms of our approach to music. And that's awesome because there's another person out there who I can hear things from and learn from, but we also have a really similar mentality in that sense. And like, yeah, awesome fucking dude. And it's just really cool that there are those people out there putting more of that stuff out and just being supportive and creative and, again, putting a good vibe out instead of just being, fuck this and fuck that and all that sort of stuff.
Totally. Now, I know you got some clients waiting for you, man. I'm sorry we started a little late. So just to wrap up, next we've got 3 or so minutes, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Just for those young hopefuls out there, they got their nose pressed up against the glass. They're looking in. They want a piece of this, man. They'll fucking chop their left arm off. They don't have to do that. But you know what I mean. So what are just a few things that for people to consider, young people to consider who want to get their foot in the door, whether it's get some work experience, start their own rig, make some positive step towards, pursuing their artistic creative endeavor?
Yeah. I guess in the sense of, from my experience, at least from the audio side of it, if you're looking to get into this sort of work, from a gear perspective to start with, shit's cheap. Getting a decent rig together is not expensive. And to be fair, the beauty of that is that everyone's on a level playing field, and what's going to be important is your mentality, how much effort you put in and what you become from it. It is something that will consume you. I don't think anyone I know who's in this industry hasn't been consumed by their job. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Live and breathe it, but make sure you enjoy it. If there's any time that you feel it's a bit too much or anything, take a step back. Doesn't mean you have to throw in the towel or anything. There are going to be hard times. But if you love it and you live it and breathe it, you're allowed to like operate at 90% all the time. As long as you keep that little 10% for yourself. I feel like with anything, if you love it enough and you put enough effort into it, it's going to go well. There's so many people you can learn from, so many online courses and all these different things that are right there that you probably wouldn't have had 20 years ago. Like, absolutely not. The paths are there. You just kind of need to choose one and see how it goes and just dedicate yourself to it. Like, I don't know any real like straight up way that things can always work out. I just think it is always a bit of trial and error and mostly just passion and dedication. If you love it, go for it. That's the best advice I can give with anything.
Mate, you have a very wise head on young shoulders. Hence the reason I had you on the podcast, my friend. And I feel very vindicated. Like you and I, like this chat today was like just the typically bullshit banter we go on. We just haven't had a chance to speak this long. And again, today has just been a very self-indulgent exercise for me, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, dude, pleasure, man. And honestly, it's like I said, it's really awesome talking to dudes like yourself and just, being able to talk about stuff that maybe some people don't get to sort of know the inner workings of. So no, thank you so much for having me on, dude. An absolute pleasure.
No, thanks, mate. Best of luck to you, Monolith Studios, your bands. You're a credit, mate. And again, thank you so much for your time. Well, I look forward to chatting with you really soon. And lots of love to Zach. And we'll speak to you soon, my friend.
Absolutely, dude. You have a good day, all right?
You too, my man. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Well, there you go. Chris Themelco, Monolith Studios. All these details will be up on the screen there for you. I'm out of here. Very big thanks to the Cave Hub out at Abbotsford in Bond Street, who do, they got a fantastic stage, PA, pre-production. It's a great facility. The Farnham boys are doing great work. And so just big ups to those fellas. So, if you guys are wanting to get some good pre-production, rehearsals, check out what they got going on down there. It's a great little facility. They've got a bar. It's fucking awesome. So, anyway, just big cheerio out there to the boys at the Cave Hub in Bond Street, Abbotsford. Okay, I'm out of here. Thank you very much for watching and listening. And as always, say please be nice to each other, but more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers. Mwah. And we will catch you later.